Hi, welcome back. I am very, very excited. I'm now talking with Hema Kangeson from Melbourne, Australia. Hema, how you doing?
Fantastic.
Hey, thanks
Good
for
to good
being
to be
here.
here.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm excited because you're going to talk. We've talked today around this notion that we have to use common language and we have to get really conscious about what we're talking about, who we're talking about, and you're going to be talking about intersectionality and action. So I'm going to get out of your way for the time being. So if you would introduce yourself, and I'll come back towards the end and facilitate a Q&A with you. Sound good?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank
All
you.
right,
Thank
enjoy.
you.
All right.
Great. Well, hello everyone. I'm really, really glad to be here and to join all of you. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge that I am in the traditional, or the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations and the Waiwurrung community in Melbourne, Australia. And I want to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I want to highlight that sovereignty was never ceded. So I am going to be talking about intersectionality and action. I actually thought, oh, should I actually bring slides or should I just talk? And I thought, you know what, as someone who has Enneagram 8, Wing 7, I thought a good thing would be to just talk about my experience about intersectionality and maybe give you some ideas of the actions you can take. Because I believe some of you have already heard a lot of great insights from a lot of other people today on what actions you can take. And I am just going to sprinkle in some other actions that you can take going forward. Okay? So, my story on intersectionality. So, I'm Hema Kangeson, and I grew up in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Okay, and as a young girl in Malaysia, in a multicultural country, I lived in a country where I was considered the other. I'm not going to explain about the other story. You can Google that. But because of my other experience, I was very, very aware about the impacts of different identities and how it can impact your life interpersonally with regards to institutions and in the system. And I realized due to that, for somebody like me, what are my positions of privilege and what are my positions of oppression? And that was at the start of my journey as a young girl. And then I was lucky enough, thanks to my parents, I was able to go and study in Northern Ireland, yes, before the peace treaty, 97, 98. And then in Belfast, I also realized, depending on who you are in society, depending on what your overlapping identities are, you would have different levels of positions of oppression and different levels of positions of privilege in the lens of interpersonal relationships to institutional level and systemic in the system as well. And then the same thing happened again when I lived in London. I lived in London, again, very grateful for 6.5 years. I saw the same thing again. This whole overlapping of identities and the impact of overlapping identities. And again, I moved to Australia 10 years ago. I've lived in 2 cities, very, very grateful. I've lived in Sydney, and then last 3 years, I've been living in Melbourne, Australia. Shout out to the Aussies here. And it's the same thing happened. I noticed the impacts of overlapping identities. And when people have particular overlapping identities, their impact and their life experiences because of that in the lens of the system and the institution. And I was wondering, what is this? What's this? What is this about? And why is this happening? Until like 2 years ago, I finally read the work of Kimberly Crenshaw. And Kimberly Crenshaw coined this word, intersectionality, 31 years ago. And I can't believe it. Somebody who was all about trying to understand what's this about these impacts of all these different levels of intersection. How come I had never ever learned or, was exposed to this, never exposed to this in my schooling in Malaysia, or exposed to this when I was living in the UK, both in Belfast and London, or in Australia. It's only through the work that I was doing, because I was so curious, that I found out about this. So that was when I found out about the word intersectionality. Okay, but at the end of the day, intersectionality, as I said earlier, is just the stories of the overlapping identities that each of us have, and the unique experiences that we have with regards to privilege and oppression. So now, by hearing this, do each of us then know what are our particular intersectional identities? I am very, very aware of mine. And with regards to your intersectional identities, your identity would be different depending on the place and time, the impact of it, as in with regards to oppression and privilege, would be different depending on the place and time you are in. It would be very, very different. So my number one action that I would like all of you to do would be to actually first acknowledge, learn, and listen with regards to your intersectional identity and the intersectional identities of different people who are marginalized, and due to that, what are the levels of impact on them from the systematic, institutional, and interpersonal level. That is my first action that I would like to share with you. That is very, very important for all of us to do, because we all live in different countries and different scenarios, and in different countries and different scenarios, this would be very, very different. So it's important to firstly do that work and acknowledge, learn, and listen to, and really the listening part from other people who are from marginalized and underrepresented communities from that particular place and at that particular time. Number two, the second action that you can take is with regards to everything that you do. Look at it from an intersectional lens. I'll tell you a story. The reason why I'm actually here today is because I am somebody who's online on LinkedIn, and I actually do the calling out when I see events that I run that actually do not actually represent the do not showcase marginalized and underrepresented voices in particular communities. And I wonder why. And I think we all can take that as an action and call that out. It's so important. We all, every single one of us, the power of social media now. Use it. It's in the tip of your hands. We've got no more excuses. I see a lot of people pointing their fingers at everybody else. Oh, let someone else do it. It's not my job. Let someone else do it. But no, I think it's about time, with everything that's happened in the world, we all need to now take accountability. No more passing the buck. Take accountability, and that's one simple action, calling out with regards to events. Do it within your own companies. I'll give you an example from an Australian perspective. When I moved to Australia 10 years ago, and it's still happening now, the key thing we talk about on diversity is gender diversity. But there is more to it than just gender diversity. I am female, but when I look in the mirror every day, what's the first thing I see? I see a brown girl. Because when people meet me, that's the first thing they say. Where are you from? Even though I've been in Australia for 10 years, without even asking me, how are you and have you had a great day? A lot of times it's, where are you from? So I think it's critical to do that. It's so important when we look at any isms, with the work we do on any isms, it's critical to look at it from an intersectional lens. We cannot do it on a siloed basis anymore. That was so 1990s, maybe 2000s, but I think we need to work in now we are 2021. let's go forward by looking at everything from that lens, because if we don't, so many people are left behind. With the work I do, I see so many people who actually, when we just focus on, let's say, if you're just focusing on gender, or when we talk about LGBTIQ, but we don't talk about the intersections, the people from marginalized communities, from those groups, never ever get involved, never have their voices heard, then there's a lot of tokenism. And due to that, we all need to, really, it's critical today. Look at everything from an intersectional lens. And, just looking at it from one lens does not work anymore. So that is point number 2, second action you can take. The third action you can take is then, now with all the work that you are doing with regards to bringing the lens of intersectionality, with regards to the people who are marginalized and underrepresented, you need to make sure they have the forefront in the voice of the change. You should not be the one, whichever community you are, from the majority community, and you don't try and be the savior. It's not the savior mentality. Don't try. It's not a handout. It's a hand up. People from marginalized and underrepresented communities, what they need now is a hand up, because we can then create amazing things together and create a better, more equitable world for everyone. So bring them on the journey, let them lead the work that's being done to create the change, because they have the voice from the community. They would be able to share their personal lived experience that is so, so crucial today. Because if we don't, we are going to be whitewashing, sorry to use all these words, whitewashing or putting something into systems that is not going to be applicable, and it's going to be continuously perpetuated, which is what's happening in the world right now. So I think it's important to break this cycle. We need to break this cycle today so we can all move forward. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting emotional about this. We need to break this cycle so it does not happen any longer. Okay, sorry. This is so personal for me. So I'm going to take a time out to break. I'll get Al to be back on stage.
Hema,
I still can't believe how emotional I got. I think it's just everything that's happening in the world at the moment that I'm just like, whoa.
It's that time, and your message, the way you're sharing it, is generating emotion in me, and we need emotion. It's important that we feel the struggle. And so I wanted to celebrate you for having the courage to share in the way that you are, because you're absolutely right. We have, I show up in this world. I'm half Mexican. I don't show up that way. I have lived overseas for close to 6 years. I have been a foreigner in a foreign land, and I have my own sense of experience, but I don't show up that way. And to honor people beyond what they look like, what they appear like, and stay in curiosity and hold what they share back in compassion and celebration, as opposed to criticism and a host of biases and assumptions. It takes a lot of work. And I think I share your frustration. I would go so far as to say I share your frustration that not enough is being done on an organizational level, on a systematic cultural level, and frankly, on an individual level. And, so what you're sharing, I mean, I just celebrate you. So I feel almost apologetic for jumping in and say, but because it's not by any means to save anything. What it is just to emphasize and celebrate what you're sharing. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you. Seriously, this has never happened before. But as I was saying, the emotions it's just been when you have it one after another, and
Sorry.
how people say it's microaggressions. I don't believe in that word at all. Because you know what? It's no more microaggressions. These are things that's like piling up, and then you'll just burst.
Yeah.
And that's why when a lot of people see how people behave certain times, they would think that someone is aggressive or disruptive. It's because of the whole life journey that they have to
Yeah.
deal with so many things. And that's why it's so important for us to actually understand, listen on people's different stories. It's critical, and start taking continuous action to move forward, because we can't wait any longer. I think, like, for me, it's all about action now, and proper intentional action, which is sustainable. I think it's critical, and bringing the right people who currently don't have a voice in that journey, because I find that we don't, there are a lot of people who don't, include the people who are marginalized and underrepresented, and they feel that they have all the answers, with regards to a lot of work that's been done in the non-for-profit sector, to a lot of other work to date. And
keep going.
No. So I think it's just critical for us to firstly get that awareness about what we are doing, get that acceptance. How can we move forward? I know there's going to be a lot of guilt on like the type of work we've done before, and having to learn, unlearn, relearn. But we can do it. I believe it. Come on, we can do it, man. So
we absolutely, and we have to, not only for the betterment of society, but also for the organization. And there's a growing body of research that supports it. Just makes good, business sense. But beyond that, it really is, the virtuous right thing to do, which actually leads me into a question, because, given your breadth of experience, both where you've lived and what you do professionally, it's the case where many organizations have, I'll just call it out, they have predominantly white leadership, white men. And then they have a DEI head who, in all likelihood, is a woman of color or a man of color. And he or she then is the representation of all the diverse groups, all the stories. And there's an implication, and this is my cynical / realistic, self that says, hey, just put in some programs and deal with it. And now we're 10, 20 years on in many organizations and we don't look much different. And granted, it's a systematic change that has to happen beyond the organization, educationally, societally. At the same time, it can be written off as an excuse. And so I would love, to your point, is for leaders to get uncomfortable. And I heard this, and I want your response to it. I was listening to radio here in the States the other day, and I do not know who was on, and shame on me, but I was driving, so I couldn't write it down. But the gentleman said, tourism walks arm in arm with peace. And I was like, whoa, that's heavy. So we don't know until we actually go and experience and sit in their shoes and eat their food and understand their struggles on the subway or on the dirt floor or whatever it is. And so I would hope that leaders and junior associates and students alike spend more time and effort to sit in somebody else's shoes, understand their stories, empathize, what are your thoughts about that idea that we have to hear each other's stories and create forums to do that?
Oh, I totally hear you. I totally agree. For somebody like me, I'm a serious global citizen. I've traveled to 55 countries, majority of it myself. And majority of it just to live in and to actually experience it as a real traveler, not the people who go on a Kontiki tour or These in the House or other kind of tours where you go and stay in a resort. That's actually, that's a really good rest and relax, but you're not really understanding the culture and the language and the people and everything. So if you really want to understand people's stories, have a lunch, have a coffee, really go, who are you? What's your story? And it's creating that place of safety and because I think for a lot of people it's like, maybe being with someone who is of a different cultural background, to a different age group, to different abilities and all the other intersections, they're not used to it, so they don't know how to take that first step. So I think the first thing is just do it. Take that first, do it. Just have that. Try a small. Just start with a coffee. And just ask a few questions, and have it as a, not like interrogation, but it's more of a two-way conversation, and sharing, oh, this is what I hear, and oh, this is what I can share, and this is what I can bring in the journey. Like, I've learned a lot from my friends who are from, Egypt to Russia to Latin America. I mean, I spent 8 months in Latin America. I feel like that was my home. I don't know how I was born in Malaysia. So, but it's conscious. You need to be intentional about it. It's so important, and it's really, I think people will share when you have this, when you're open. I know for me, I'm like, because I'm such an extrovert and I love sharing my stories, I feel like the way I do it is because I want to share, because I want to make people feel comfortable, like put their guard down. Like, I've coached a lot of teams. Majority of the teams I've coached when I was in the corporate world were mainly men. Right? Men of different cultural backgrounds, different age groups. But they have said, Hema, you created this place where we feel safe. And that's why we're sharing all these things with you. And that's why we can now want to do more work together. We want to be more creative because you created the safe space. So think about that, people at all these organizations. You're going to have amazing ideas from people.
I mean, there's so much to explore in this conversation, and I know we have limited time, but I would like to talk to you again. I'll just say that for sure. Is that we obviously can do it right now. We can reach out, particularly even with COVID. We can reach out virtually as a start. We don't have travel all over the world. Like, even the way we here in California, which is extraordinarily diverse, much like Melbourne, it's like we can connect with people. But it does take initiative, and it does take energy. We have emotional reactions, right? We have, and we can't, we have our day jobs too. So, creating the space, holding the space, having time to process, is really a tough thing when you talk about managing capacity. So my last question for you: to what responsibility do you believe organizational leaders have to create these spaces, or is it going to be up to individuals to really, do what they have to do, on their own personal journey? Because hopefully it should be an and at the end of the day. But what would you say to leaders who are kind of haven't created those forums yet?
I definitely think it's an and. I think it's always both the leaders and each individual, for them to actually take specific action. So for the leaders, I think if you lead by example, it's critical to lead by example. Like what you said earlier, if I play back where, a lot of time, there's a lot of energy, we have a lot of work. But you know what? I can say one thing, if you spend this time and energy, even though at the start it might feel like it's a lot, the payback, trust me, I'm a chartered accountant. I look at everything, not just with regards to people and culture. I also look at it with regards to ching, money, and also profits and revenue and long-term growth of companies, right?
Yeah.
Don't be tactical, be strategic. That's why I'm telling you, leaders out there, we live in a future of work where if you know how to lead by example and create the change in this, where you want to be inclusive, create a place of belonging and psychological safety, and create that, you show that you can create that space. People in your team will follow you. 100%. If you make the excuse, everybody in your team will do the same thing. Oh, my leader doesn't have time. It's just so hard. I've got so much to do. I've got family, and I need to run this $1 billion company. How am I going to but you know what? Your $1 billion company in 5 years is not going to be a $1 billion company no more, because the world is ever evolving. And if we don't get up to it, there's going to be some other leader who's going to come on board, who is going to be savvy like this, and no, you need to be strategic and think about this holistically. So it's not just, it's nice to humanity, as you said earlier. It's fantastic business sense. It's
Yeah.
really, I totally believe in the B Corp movement. For those who don't know about the B Corp movement, and
That's where we are. We're in the process of becoming one. So yeah, absolutely.
cool. So I think
Yeah.
it's so important. We can't just look at just our shareholders, but we need to look at all our stakeholders. And then your
Yeah.
employees, every team member will think about it the same way. That's my 2 cents.
Well, Hema, that's more than 2 cents. That's like $5. That's 25 bucks. No, that's fantastic. Hey, I love the way you show up. Thanks for your energy, perspective, ideas. I mean, all are hugely valuable. I'm super grateful to you, and I look forward to continuing the discussion in the coming days, weeks, months, because obviously there's a lot of work to be done. So again, thank you for doing what you do, being who you are.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was great to be here.